Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Welcome to your Sunday afternoon programming at South by Southwest 2025. We're so happy to have you here. I know that there are literally 10,000 things out there vying for everybody's attention, so it's really, truly honored that you were able to join us today. I really appreciate it. Just out of curiosity, before we go into all of the mix of the conversation, how many people are here because you already have some sort of interest or relationship in this conversation about psychedelics and religion or spirituality? Okay, that's a solid majority. How many people here just walked in? What that means is that everybody is here on purpose. That's a really good sign. That means that you're here because you want to be, so thank you so much. It really means a lot. Maybe one more question I'll ask is, how many people are here from Austin or Texas, let's say more generally? Okay, and how many people are here from the East Coast-ish? You can interpret that liberally. Okay, how many people are here from the West Coast? Okay, we've got a good blend here. And how many actually people are here from not the United States? Excellent. Okay, great. So glad you all are here. Shout out. Really grateful. My name is Ismail. I'll be your host for this afternoon. We'll have a dynamic panel. I'll share a little bit of context. We'll share a little bit of stories. We'll give you some legal education, not advice, and a little bit of storytelling, a little bit of context about like what exactly is happening in the field from these two amazing perspectives of our speakers here. We'll have some time for Q&A at the end. And I'll warn you now that we're not going to cover all the things that you might want to hear. This is a really big topic. It's one that demands hours or days and sometimes years of time and dedication and conversation. But what we're hoping to do today is give a little bit of a taste, a little bit of context on what exactly is going on in the landscape out there, how to maybe think about it in whatever context that you're in, and hopefully just give people a little bit more information about what the next step is in their own life, in their own path, whatever that looks like for each of you. Sound good? Okay, great. Before we do anything else, would you just indulge me and maybe let's take a moment to just close our eyes. We are at a panel, after all, called Beyond Belief, where we're getting to talk about some of the more spiritual and esoteric elements of this conversation, something that's often underappreciated in the zeitgeist and the hype around science and research. Also important, but also only part of the picture. So while you're here, maybe take a moment to close your eyes, and if you can, put your feet on the ground. And see if you can just take a moment to elongate your breath and enter the physical space that we're in. Maybe you're a little thrown off by the fact that we had a time change last night, which snuck up on some of us. Maybe you flew in from out of town and you're still adjusting to the time zone or the climate or the air pressure or just the vibes of being here with so many people. Maybe you're just coming from a series of things in your own life and you're getting a chance to land here now in this conversation. Whatever it is, just inviting everyone to take a second to feel into the fact that you're here, sense into the fact that you have a body, and be with the appreciation and gratitude, if you can contact it, for our glorious lives that allow us to be in conversation and relationship and in proximity with one another. In this beautiful, challenging, complex, dynamic, confronting, and inspirational time. Awesome, thanks everybody. Feel free to bring yourself back in the room whenever you're ready. Feeling okay? Great. Once again, my name is Ismail Ali. I work as the Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Studies. I do a little bit of this and a little bit of that. I've been at the organization for about 10 years. And part of my connection to this conversation, while I have had a little bit of that work in the realm of psychedelics, religion, and spirituality with the organization, I also work as an attorney and have spent some time with clients and friends and colleagues and communities that are thinking about this conversation, which is like, how exactly do we look at the intersection of psychedelics and religion? Big capital R, big serious word there that means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And how do we navigate the fact that psychedelics, whether we like it or not, whether we know it or not, tend to have some sort of spiritual, esoteric, non-physical, non-biological, something dynamic for people when they experience them. And we all know that the zeitgeist in the larger conversation that has happened in public has focused a lot on mental health treatment. A lot of the conversations that are being had here at South by over the last few years have focused on that. In fact, I was in a conversation earlier today about PTSD and the importance of looking at the treatment of mental health and so on. And there's a good reason why the conversation about psychedelics broadly has focused on that in a lot of ways over the last few years. Desperate times, desperate needs, desperate people. What can we do to support the suffering that people are experiencing and maybe bring some relief to that? I'm really glad this conversation is being had here today because for many years, I think a lot of us have also been tracking what's been happening in the field and aware that while it is important to be talking about mental health for all of the reasons that I suspect we all know here, that we also take a look at these other elements of what's happening and these experiences that are reported kind of anecdotally on the internet, but also at the center of so many of these long-standing indigenous and plant-based and earth-based traditions that have carried and been in relationship to these practices, esoteric and otherwise, for a very long time, hundreds, thousands of years, depending on who you ask and where you're talking about. So part of the idea of this conversation is to bring light to some of what's happening in that intersection from the perspective of some of us here. And the reason I ask this question about international stuff is because we are, for better or worse, also working here in the context of US law. So we'll talk a little bit about what exactly that means and how that impacts this conversation and start it from there. So with that, I'm gonna ask my three amazing co-panelists here to introduce themselves briefly. We'll start with Sean, Justin, Veronica. And then what we'll do is we'll go these introductions and then I'll be asking them questions to give a little bit of a deeper story into what they're up to and what they're doing. Sound good? Sound good? Yes. All right, no. Okay, let's go. Sean, go for it.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. For the Brazilians in the room, boa tarde, buenas tardes, for our Spanish-speaking brothers and sisters. I'm an attorney in the psychedelic field. This is what a psychedelic attorney looks like. 25 years in drug policy reform, 10 years standing beside disproportionately black and brown people facing prison for drug charges, 12 years as a cannabis and hemp attorney legalizing cannabis in Colorado. I was one of the co-authors of that initiative. In the last 8 years, turns out cannabis was a gateway drug to psychedelics, and I've been focusing on psychedelics for the last 8 years, and I have a lot to say, but giving a lot of thanks to the medicines, to the indigenous people of South America and the world. And you are in the place that started the drug war, and we're going to explain to you how the U.S. is ending the drug war, and the spiritual path is one of the most exciting elements there.
Thank you so much, Sean. Super glad you're here. Justin?
Awesome. My name is Justin LaPree. I'm the founder and president of Illuminating Heroes, which is an entheogenic church for veterans and first responders here just outside of Austin, Texas. I served in the Marine Corps in the early 2000s. I was wounded in the Second Battle of Fallujah in 2005 with a traumatic brain injury. Went into the VA system. I was misunderstood, misdiagnosed, was on 13 different pharmaceuticals, got addicted to OxyContin, and found myself under a bridge, homeless. Worked on Wall Street for about 9 years, and then became a firefighter for the city of Austin. And I was really looking for purpose again. Didn't know human suffering until I became a fireman, which led me to continue to have unhealthy coping mechanisms, alcohol, relationships, drugs, and led me to a suicide attempt in November of 2018 at my fire station. And I'm here to talk about how plant medicines, fungal medicines, toad secretions were the catalyst in saving my life. and how I got to this stage today. So I'll dive more into that, but just want to say thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Veronica?
And I'm called Veronica Lightning Horse. I really started out on my own healing journey, complex PTSD, was going down fast, was given a diagnosis to really not live past 36. And I had already 5 children at that time. So I had to figure something out and figure something out quick. The medicines called, and that was a life-changing moment for me. The medicines then dragged me into politics. And that was a whole rabbit hole of, oh my God, I did not know that the world was like this. In my little take care of my family, raise my children, just survive mentality and lifestyle I had there for a while. And that work ended up leading me to the recognition that people are waking up and they need to wake up and they need education, they need awareness, they need each other, and they need community to a degree that we have forgotten. And the more that I see community come together, I'm seeing healing in such a way that is beyond these incredible plant medicines. We need each other, and I think we're finally starting to find each other in the darkness.
Can we give a quick round of applause for these amazing panelists? Just the fact that they're here, I feel like we can close this out right now. I'm not satisfied, but we've got about 15 minutes to go, so we're going to keep talking. Thank you all so much. And maybe just to give a little more context, I know a couple more people came into the room. Just to add into why it's so important, I think, to be having this conversation. There's a few good questions even in the description here, which is like, what are we exactly talking about? So I'm just going to give a very, very abridged history. The United States was founded, at least in part, on a story of religious freedom, right? Of this idea that what people believe should not be a limitation to the rights that they have or what they're able to offer to society or what kind of protections they receive or so on. Now, it's a complicated thing when you're talking about belief, because who knows what you believe besides the fact that you believe it. It's all up here. And trying to figure out how exactly you sort out the rights or the privileges or the responsibilities that come with someone's belief system in the context of a world where we're talking about substances that as of right now are criminalized and have a particular social stigma, legal risk, all these other things to it, means that we're threading a few very sensitive needles here. So I want to ask Sean first to see if you can give a little bit of an overview of what's happening in the legal realm as it relates to psychedelics, specifically in the context of religion. What do you think the audience needs to know just from a starting point? There's all this hype, there's all this storytelling. What the heck is going on out there?
Awesome. It's so great to be on this panel with such deep brothers and sisters here, by the way. Yes, everybody, the law of psychedelics in the US is simple and complicated. All the psychedelics are Schedule 1s, illegal under federal law, meaning they have no medical value and they have a high likelihood of addiction. Can we all laugh at that? Come on. So that is the technical designation of these things. But as Izzy says, what they say when you fight an opponent is you shouldn't attack your opponent's weakness, you should attack their strength. And this is what the psychedelic movement has done. Because of the strength of religious freedom in the United States, then we ask the government to recognize this value that it says it cares about so deeply. But the biggest misperception people have is they say, oh, the Second Amendment, or First Amendment is what protects me, the right to religion. And actually the courts have interpreted that the First Amendment does not give you the right to use psychedelics.
Womp womp.
Wah, wah. So, but here's what happened in a country that's very committed, especially to Christian freedom. In 1993, the Congress looked at this Supreme Court decision and said, well, wait a minute. We want spiritual freedom, religious freedom to go above other laws. And so they passed the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in 1993. Again, it's largely been used by mainstream religious organizations to be exempt from zoning laws, from other things. But in 2009, the UDV, Brazilian União do Vegetal Church, went all the way to the Supreme Court with an ayahuasca case and got formal recognition that the UDV practice is a sincere religious practice. The government cannot interfere with the psychedelic use of, or the use of ayahuasca. This was followed up a couple years later by the Santo Daime Church on the West Coast. So both Brazilian mainstream ayahuasca churches have been recognized in the United States. And then the case that Izzy mentioned, Izzy and I worked on a case in the last 5 years that became the third ever federally recognized ayahuasca church. It is the Church of the Eagle and Condor, founded by Americans who were taught by Shipibo people. So it's not an indigenous practice, but certainly inspired by Shipibo indigenous practice. These are the 3 formally recognized psychedelic churches in the United States. And then we have hundreds of people operating in this field, saying they're legal, asserting legality. And the reason there's not more formally recognized people is because you have to basically be interfered with to get federal recognition. You can't go to court and just say, hi, I'm a psychedelic church. But if they take your sacrament...
So you could do that, but like don't think anyone would recommend it, I don't think you'll get what you want, but...
Nobody's been successful. See Soul Quest. So the point is, we live in this field right now with 3 formally recognized ones, hundreds of people asserting their defense, but really it's this Religious Freedom Restoration Act at the federal level, and then you also need to look at the laws in your state. So just to wrap up legality, that is the religious freedom side, but remember in my state of Colorado, we passed decriminalization of 4 psychedelics. You can also come to Colorado legally under state law and share natural medicines, psilocybin, DMT, mescaline other than peyote, and iboga. You cannot share iboga actually, but you can possess it. Anyways, there's state laws like Colorado. You could come today and do a ceremony in Colorado with religious reasons and be legal under state law and have an argument you're legal under federal. So that is the main legal structure. Oregon has a regulated psilocybin program. Colorado has one. Other states have research laws. But really, we're looking at a federal religious freedom law and some state decriminalization laws.
Totally, and I think the key detail to flag here is that because of the way that U.S. law works, people are familiar with the concept often of like precedent or kind of the way that the court system works. What's interesting about the dynamic that we're in right now is that we have some very explicit, clear protections for the cases and for the churches that, and for the communities that Sean was mentioning. And then to your point, like literally hundreds or dozens or hundreds of churches that or communities that are working, you could say kind of in the wake of that. So we have some information that has come out of those case law, out of the case law, out of those settlements that gives us a starting point, that gives us a sense of like, well, what is the kind of thing that the federal government or other agencies might be looking at that would make them decide whether or not a church or a community is safe or not safe. We're going to deconstruct the word church and religion a little bit more later, but notice that we're kind of going back and forth on what words we're using and so on. So what I'm going to do now is turn to our other 2 guests who I'd like to hear a little bit more. I mean, you both give quick intros about who you are and kind of what brought you here. But as people who are currently in the context of operating spiritual communities that are in the context of various legal environments, for you, Justin, in Texas, for you in Colorado, I'm curious if maybe Justin first and then Veronica, if you could give a little bit of context for, you know, you could tell a little bit of your story. What else brought you to kind of working in the context you are, and what have you found? What have been the exciting opportunities? What are the challenges? What's up in that conversation?
Thank you, Izzy. So when I came back from Iraq, so I grew up in the Roman Catholic Church. I went to private school my entire life. When I came back from the war, I came home an atheist. I experienced what I considered to be hell. And there was really no respect of our enemy. A lot of immoral things happened over there, things that I wasn't proud of. And I didn't really understand how to unpack that. It's like, what's gonna happen to me now? You know, I just killed all these people. We had to kill women and children, right? Bad things happen and more. And I was convinced that I'd been lied to my entire life. And I didn't believe in God, I didn't believe in anything. And after my suicide attempt, I worked with mushrooms in December of 2018. And what was really interesting about that 6-hour experience was, I didn't want to die anymore. Really profound. I was at the point of my suicide attempt, I was going to leave behind a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. And I just didn't know how to be a dad. I just didn't know how to live. And I had this really kind of quick understanding that there was something bigger than myself, and that I felt connected, and I felt love for myself for the first time in my conscious memory. And it allowed me, I had this, I created a space for me to start to grieve the loss of my friends. Up to that point, I had lost 16 Marines to suicide, two firefighters to suicide. And I understood why they were leaving, because we didn't know how to live, right? We got indoctrinated into the system that's broken. And we're just, treating the symptom, treating the symptom, treating the symptom, treating the symptom. And I really wanted to get down to the root as to why I'm feeling this way. Why do I feel disconnected? Why do I not love myself? I did a lot of great things overseas, things that I was very proud of, but I wasn't feeling pride at that moment. And so about 6 months later, I worked with a toad secretion, 5-MeO-DMT. Wow. I experienced God. And that's really hard to kind of, for those that haven't worked with that medicine, really to understand. But I experienced God. And it was so profound for me. I didn't want to die anymore. And I started to understand how I could truly live, and how I can teach my young children how to live and how to be really good, kick-ass humans. And I started to work with different medicines over the years, and they were all allowing me the space to have these traumatic events that had happened in my life, giving me the courage to step into the unknown and to relive those experiences so I could grieve them and I could feel them and just sit with my emotions. In an Advocacy ceremony in 2022, I had a memory of being molested as a 5-year-old boy. Crazy that my subconscious had buried that for my entire life. My parents never told me about it. I had no living memory of it. And having this re-experience of a very traumatic event for me, I didn't have any shame about it, but it helped me understand why I had safety issues throughout my life. Instead of me being like, oh, just overanalyzing everything. Well, it's because I was molested as a 5-year-old, right? And I don't feel safe. So in 2022, I was really tired of being a fireman. I was tired of seeing people die. I was tired of doing CPR. And I just wanted to really have beautiful days and spend more time with the people that I love. And so I left the fire department, and I wanted to give access to my friends who were on the verge of dying. And so I started an entheogenic church here under religious freedom laws as a sovereign being. Because I don't believe that the DEA has jurisdiction over free exercise. Because they don't. And I've done enough for this country to want to do something for my friends so I never get that phone call again. And through my lived experience of these medicines, of these natural medicines, which I believe are God. God created nature, God created all of this, in my belief. And instead of the government taking God out of my life, I learned how to put God back into my life. And these medicines allowed me that opportunity to commune and have mystical experiences, and to be able to understand that the divine is within myself. So I started to do this for my friends. It's free for veterans and first responders. I refuse to take money. And I have seen modern day miracles happen. Now, I will tell you that there's so much more than just the sacrament. It's not a panacea. It's not going to save your life. But it will be the catalyst to allow you to analyze where you need to make some changes. Maybe we need to remove some people in the friend group. Maybe we need to put down a substance. These medicines allow us to be more present with ourselves, present with our loved ones, present in life. Instead of being in the victim mindset of life is happening to me, life is happening for me. I haven't been on a pharmaceutical since 2018. I feel more alive today than I've ever felt in my life. So.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think part of what you're getting to is something that I think I imagine others in the audience think about a lot, which is the urgency of need. And it's interesting because we're talking about the unfolding of and the integration of, sometimes clumsily, sometimes beautifully, these powerful tools, beings, into everything else that's happening. And trying to do that in the context of so much need and so much suffering and so much desperation. So I really have so much appreciation for that kind of willingness to step into this unknown and do what we can to support our friends and family and ourselves. So I really appreciate you sharing. Would you care to share a little bit more about your story, background, and why you're here? Please do.
I'm here at the end of the day because I was called. I am a 5'1", 120-pound, half indigenous woman of color. This world is very, very challenging for people like me. I entered into this space because I also found myself in these medicines. To remember who I was, where I came from, the medicine of this land, not just the medicine that grows from it. To find my way back to, I am not something to be kicked around and pushed around and knocked down, abused and ignored. Not anymore. I entered into this space to do the decriminalization work for these medicines so that people could have access to it. To begin that ripple of, it's awareness, y'all, it's education, it's the idea that made this sick to begin with. Everybody was just fine. We're living off the land. We're enjoying all the things. Up with the sun, down with the sun. It was beautiful and it was harmonious. And then there came this idea of ownership and possession and having. And that ripple, we are still in the effects of that, only now people are going, oh, wait, well, maybe that doesn't work out too well because this isn't exactly working anymore. I don't know what to do. So these little medicines pop their heads up. They never got lost. They were never forgotten. People are remembering now. They call it the Renaissance. The psychedelic Renaissance. And they're coming back. And that frequency is entering into society again. To ask those questions. So yeah, I'm the Reverend of the Healing Ground Church in Colorado. But it's an idea. It's an offering of choice. Of, hey, all these things that you were born with, that you think you are, that you think you're made of, that you think that's what all this is and what it's for, maybe, and also maybe not. So here's a choice. You can take it or you can leave it. You can adapt it for yourself. Yes, it's about healing, because I got tired of being angry. I got tired of the whole racism thing, the whole angry to be a woman of color thing, tired of being abused and just angry because of it, left out. Anger doesn't work. It doesn't work. So I had to find something else. And what I found through the medicines was peace. To be able to offer, here's a choice. It's just a choice. You can take it or leave it, because at the end of the day, every single person I have sat with, whether it's a sex abuse victim, whether it's a veteran, whether it's a first responder, whether it's a father, whether it's a mother, Every single one of them came to these medicines because they were suffering and they didn't want to suffer anymore. And most of the time, the reasons behind their suffering was because of the beliefs. I'm not good enough, I don't deserve, I'm not worthy, this place is horrible, I'm a victim, everything sucks and everything is going to hell in a handbasket, that is evil, this is good, I don't know where I fit, so oh fucking well. That's the suffering. To find a way out of the suffering, yeah, these are helpers, these are teachers, and that is the indigenous way from the very beginning. These are spirits, and they are teachers, and they are helpers. How you treat them, how you work with them, that is absolutely up to you, but so are the lessons. This is technology, for all you tech fans here. This is ancient technology, and the words and the intentions that are spoken, the frequencies that are emitted into these medicines are important, because these little gummy things here and there, not made without intention, is a ticket to nowhere. Or maybe not. But at the end of the day, you're here because something is questioning in you. Something is awake, and you know at a very deep level something is not okay, and there is a strength enough in you that you want it to change. And that's what gives me hope to choose peace instead of anger. Is a room like this, is a conference like this, even all the ups and downs that come with it. There's hope here.
Good point. Thanks y'all so much. I'm gonna complicate things a bit, and then we'll have like 15 minutes for question and answer. So feel free to start gearing it up. Thank you all so much. That was a fantastic starting point. Fantastic to hear where both of you are coming from and kind of what sparked the desire to have this, to kind of create these containers in the first place. And thank you, Sean, for some of the background and legal context and background. It's really, really each of these stories could be their own full hour. I just want to acknowledge that and say that we're going to keep moving because there's a lot to say, but it's real. Okay, so I want to talk about, so this talk is called Beyond Belief, which is it's like a nice, ambitious title. And we've been using the word church and religion. And just as a tiny, tiny bit more background, right now in the United States, the religious freedom protections are for religions. Capital R. What does that even mean? What is a religion? Who decides? Who decides what's a religion? What counts? So far, the courts have had an opinion. To your point, Justin, the DEA has an opinion. I don't think they want to have an opinion. I think by law they're required to have an opinion, at least to some extent, but I don't think that they're super thrilled about having an opinion. I don't think that people at the DEA, actually I'm quite sure that the people at the DEA aren't we're definitely the arbiters of what's spiritual and what's not. But because of the way US law is set up, they have to have an opinion, and to be fair, part of their kind of range is this question of safety and diversion, the fact these substances, which do have risks, which do bring up complex ethical questions, which do bring up complex physiological, psychological, interpersonal dynamics that need to be managed and named and acknowledged. And so much of the work and the training, you could say, of holding a container and safety around that is both knowing what are the appropriate ethical boundaries in a power dynamic of that kind, and also what are the things that I'm coming with personally, and where are my own unseen corners or unseen shadows. I've been personally engaged with and seen all kinds of issues go down, and so often it's because people really want to do good but don't always know how to because they don't have the context. So I want to bring this back to this concept of religion, because right now we all have probably our own background or relationship to this word religion or this word church. And I'm curious about everyone's opinion about the use of those words, religion or church. What about the terminology that we use in this conversation, not just today, but in general, works for you? And what's more complicated, or what feels like maybe it fits part of the story, but not the whole thing? I know it's an edgy question, but I'm curious about people's perceptions on any of it.
So I had to surrender a lot on that. It took me over a year to write the doctrine because I was so freaked out about the dogma of it, or writing yet another set of rules to live by for other people to bang each other upside the head with. This is right and this is wrong and you're wrong, and kicking people out. I was raised a Jehovah's Witness. Yeah, it was like that. So, which actually made me very supportive in being able to do this, because the challenge is just the boxes. Right? It's that anchor of this is this word, this is the definition of this word, and then we have this assumption that when I say this word, you have the same definition and box for it. And I have learned over time that is simply not true. Looking at redefining these things as we have an opportunity to do so, and that has to be done in community, and that has to be done with conversation, is when I say church, this is what I mean. It's not a huge Gothic structure. It is not this thing that we all go do on Sunday. We are all very pious and dress our best and put our heads down because we are underlings and we are less than. It is not defined as it used to be defined, and that is already clear in how many different churches and things that there are now. This what we're doing is a community. It is a healing circle. It is a building. If you actually look up the stinking word, it is a building that people come together to worship. That's the actual definition of the word, looking it up. Religion is the same thing. I heard religion, I hear persecution. Abso-freaking-lutely. With my ancestral indigeneity, heck yes. Religion is just persecution. It is death. It is hatred. So I had to redefine that in myself so that I could open myself up to go, well, you know what? That's an old definition, isn't it? Well, it's got to be if we're going to build. So we began to redefine this whole religion thing, and I love that there's a re in it. To redo this religion thing and make it what it is for ourselves, for the individual within the community, to be able to feel safe, to grow and ask questions and not have to live this rigidity of being afraid to speak, afraid to offend, afraid to get in trouble, afraid to get it wrong. To create that safe container, to be able to say, hey, let's discuss this and see what we think, and maybe get some ideas on how we can do this different. Because, hey, you know what? If it was working, none of this would be illegal and there wouldn't be a drug war on our own people.
Well said. Thank you. Yes, I too had a lot of language was the old, definitions of different words for me was my old way of thinking. And I did have to think differently. And when I was really reprogramming the program, in church, growing up as an altar boy meant one thing. But I can tell you, I personally never felt connected with God. I didn't. I was doing all the things, and I would commune with the Eucharist, but I didn't feel any sort of connection until I started to work with these sacraments. And to Veronica's point, like, what is a church? Right? We're told something as a very young human, what a church is, and I think they're great. I think they serve a purpose, and I think religion can be a good thing. It can also be divisive. And, we've been killing each other over religion forever. And I believe that all religions are the same, it's just interpreted differently. And it's really interesting how, growing up as a Catholic, it's like, thou shalt not kill. And here we are. I mean, they were doing a lot of killing back then if they didn't follow their beliefs. And, I believe the church is just a place for believers to gather, right? And this is, our church is a place for people to find a sanctuary, to where they're heard and they're seen. And they can commune with other individuals in community-based settings, just like what you guys are doing that do go to church. It's the same thing. without dogma, and we're acceptance of all religions. It's like, whatever you believe in is great, and it's welcome here. It may not be what I believe in, but I do believe that we believe the same thing, and we want to be better humans. And we want to be more present for each other, and I love you, and I see you, and we're just mirrors for each other. So that's my church. That's where I want to be. That's where I want to belong to. I want to belong with other humans that are wanting to raise the vibration, that are wanting to succeed and go from surviving to thriving. That's who I want to be around with. I want us to be able to believe in something bigger than ourselves. And through this work with plant medicines, I went from, believing that God existed to knowing.
Beyond belief.
Beyond belief. Right? A lot of my friends that have very strong religious practices are very scared of this church. And that's okay, and it's welcome. But they have a fear that it's going to change their belief. And I'm here to tell you that I think these medicines enhance your faith. Whatever it is that you believe in, I believe you're going to believe even more, if not know. And so I encourage individuals, I'm not saying that this is for everybody. This is not the way, this is a way. And I am here to tell you that there are spirits in these medicines. And you can't synthesize a spirit. And I'm here to tell you that if and when you guys are ever curious enough to maybe just want to think a little bit differently, maybe find some answers about where you came from, because we're in the age of forgetting. With all the social media influx and all the information we're just downloading, we're forgetting how to truly live our lives with purpose and connection. And I believe depression is the reason why people are depressed is because they don't feel connected to anybody. They don't feel connected to themselves. These medicines are teachers to allow us to feel connected again with ourselves, and I think it starts with us. I think it's more than just a mental health crisis in this country. I believe we have a spiritual crisis in this country. And I believe if we can address the spiritual crisis, most, if not all, of these other labels and disorders will go away.
We shall see, won't we?
Well,
Sean, religion, belief, church,
Yeah, I'm gonna jump.
law, what's going on, man?
Come on now. Well, it's funny because these are both clients of mine, and I've been honored to help you think through some of these issues. And so many people get caught up on this word church and religion, and that's because the law is called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. But to Justin's point, remember, spirituality is bigger than religion. And so the thing as a lawyer, what I do in court, talk to judges, is explain to them how the indigenous perspective is not that there's a book that tells us the meaning of life in advance and all we have to do is follow this. And again, I don't speak for indigenous people, but what I understand is that it's a relational experience, that you're in relation to the earth, you're in relation to other spirits, to your ancestors, to the spirits all around us, and this is something that is revelatory, that it's revealed in the moment, that it's relational. When you're having a plant medicine experience, these insights that Justin talked about. And so we're educating courts about that idea, and they're accepting these concepts. The moment the government told me, we don't question Shipibo spirituality, Amazonian indigenous spirituality, they know it's a real thing.
And it's a big deal because we've spent a lot of time in the United States. We won't go down the very long history of dark jurisprudence, but damn, it's been a fight to say anything that isn't kind of normative Christianity should be taken seriously in that environment. So,
well, and also Native Americans in the U.S. had to use the church model through the Native American church to gain recognition for peyote. So this seems to be this kind of thing we're doing. And actually, to Justin's point about things being a lie, like, we live in this time, whatever you think about the current government, there's an opportunity here. We're in a time when there's laws that aren't enforced, and there's things that are tolerated, and religious freedom is elevated. And I just want to feel into that this is part of the proliferation of this movement, is that federal law prohibits it, but nobody's enforcing it. The government's telling me they're not going after people. So there's a huge opportunity. And again, like Justin said, we've lost this formal institutional religion. In Canada, for example, less than half of people go to church or identify as Christian, and we're on that trajectory in the US. So what replaces that? And this is the real earth-based indigenous spirituality that we're all longing for. As the Brazilian philosopher Alton Krenak says, the future is ancestral. You know, that this is the thing I'm most dedicated to. When we look at the options, we've got these awesome researchers here listening to us. They're creating FDA-approved drugs. They're creating state-regulated models with licensed facilitators. But actually, the most exciting thing for me as a lawyer is this spiritual movement. Because we don't need an FDA study to tell us that ayahuasca is safe. We don't need an FDA study to tell us that mushrooms are safe. Indigenous people have been doing this for 6,000 years. And that is the Western way of thinking, that we need a doctor. What we need is community, harm reduction, spirituality. And so, you know, this is the opportunity, and this is the thing I'm most committed to more than anything else, because of also the healing and trauma that I've recovered from through plant medicine. So, yeah, I mean, don't get hung up on the words. Like, this is an opportunity right now. And the laws will follow the culture. So actually what we're doing is cultural change. Once the cultural has a consensus that this is a healthy, good thing, then you'll see all the laws you want to see. You'll see a Spiritual Freedom Restoration Act. You'll see state laws. But the work that Veronica, Justin, and so many others are doing is the cultural change that is going to get us even more protected in the future.
I want to bring attention to something. First off, in the last 12 or so minutes, if you have a question, then please step over here to the mic that is set up for questions, and I'll start calling on people in just a second. Thank you. I just want to name, as people are walking up, also just in the context of what you're sharing, the immense responsibility that comes with what's happening here. The thing about, and the shadow side, and a number of us here have worked in different sides of this area of work, right? And it's very interesting because there's a lot of shortcomings that I think people can speak to about the federal system, whether it's the DEA or the FDA, these different systems and so on. But at their best, they're trying to create kind of barriers to entry or some sort of regulatory frameworks. So you have what we can call consumer protection. It's not a very sexy word, but it's a very important one when you're talking about population level, public health level issues. That have tremendous potential, and also potential for both risk and also benefit. So I bring that up because one of the things about entering a space where you're kind of outside of the realm of the traditional regulatory environment is that it brings a responsibility and necessity for the people who are working in this kind of spiritual realm outside of that to, for lack of a better term, self-regulate. And I think there's going to be a big ongoing question going forward about how exactly do spiritual communities, whether it's in the United States or other places, bring in some of the ethical guardrails, some of the things to ensure that the training, that the care, that the infrastructure for the people who are going through these experiences are adequately supported. And so we're not leaving people behind we're not leaving people in the gaps in our enthusiasm to support people in so many different ways. So definitely, if you haven't already, check out the Sacred Plant Alliance community of churches that are doing great stuff. Check out Chacruna, doing really, really good stuff. There's a lot of good education out there about how to think about churches and how to think about safety. There's a lot of other good stuff out there, but I'm just saying, make sure that as you're engaging with this, whether it's from the perspective of a consumer, if you want to call that term, a client, a person seeking support in some way, or you're offering space holding, that you're really thinking about what is my responsibility here, because the reason, to Sean's point, we have this blissful realm of relatively low enforcement in this area is because people have been able to self-regulate in the underground for some time. And I think as this gets more visible, it brings the increased need of responsibility to have that mechanism and those frameworks of care so that people don't get left behind as we go. All right, we've got like 8 questions in 8 minutes, so let's see what we got. If you don't mind, if you could just start with your name real quick and maybe where you're from, and then give the question.
Hey, I'm Sarah Serotonin. I'm from Detroit, where all entheogenic plants are decriminalized. I am from Per Ankh, House of Life. We are a mushroom church in Detroit. I am a high priestess, so I, came down here to learn. And I was just wondering if you guys have any apprenticeships. Or do any teaching? Is there any
Teaching or apprenticeships? I think for questions like that, it'd be better if you come and speak to the speakers directly afterward.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for being here.
Hey everybody, my name is Kevin, and so I have a nonprofit, and we give financial assistance to folks who can't afford stuff. But we're a 501c3, so we're all above board. And I've been talking with a lawyer about possibly doing stuff with churches. She said that there's actually only 3 churches that have a federal exemption.
That's true.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys spoke to this early, but can you?
We did.
Okay.
Go ahead, finish your thought.
Well, but yeah,
There's more to that.
You can go.
Yeah, so, yes, and those 3 churches is because they filed suit against the DEA and they won,
Got it.
right? And so,
Is there a process for that besides?
yeah, so there is a process, but the process is not a process, right? It's like the DEA, somebody, has made the DEA made the DEA the gatekeeper as to what is religion and
The
spirituality.
courts did, but yeah.
Courts did. So, they just sit on applications, right? And so, because they don't know how to deal with any of this, right? So, like I said earlier, the DEA doesn't have jurisdiction of free exercise. And so, I created a foundation to be able to receive money if there is a board of directors that doesn't want to directly fund into a church that's not recognized from the DEA or the federal government. So there are ways to do that, and I think we can have a further conversation.
Another great question for you to come up and ask these guys afterward.
Yeah, fascinating. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks so much for being here.
I mean, I would just highlight that's one of those areas where early cannabis entrepreneurs took a lot of risk and did a lot of amazing things. And like I said about the enforcement environment, half the IRS is getting fired. What are you worried about? You're worried you're going to get audited by who? And if you do, what's the risk you're going to lose a nonprofit? Okay, so what are your values at the end of the day? What is the risk? You just make choices. I'm not giving you legal advice.
I agree with that. And I want to say that, and there are cases that we won't go into right now of groups that started churches who didn't quite dial in or close all the loops that they maybe could have, and now owe millions and millions of dollars in wrongful death fees. So I just want to say it's not quite so simple as just take the risk. I know that's not what Sean is saying, but what I would say is for anyone, and this is true for anyone else that's in line actually while we're here, if you're asking for specific advice about a situation, movement of money or use of medicine, ask an attorney who's looking at your specific situation. Don't ask us here on stage.
Yeah.
Great.
I was asking
Okay.
for general thoughts about it.
All good. All
Not
good.
legal advice.
So, we use this word religion, it's been brought up a lot, and I just keep being reminded of the Tao Te Ching where it says, religion is the husk of true faith. And I think once we can start to move away from the religion, these acts that to us have no spiritual sort of connection, then we're moving in the right direction. But my question was specifically, do you guys face any challenges with a congregation that is dynamic, given that they have the ability to have a direct connection with the divine? After reading The Immortality Key, it seems like these medicines have been used even within the Hebrew community and the burning of the acacia, but it was reserved for the high priest and separated from the other people, and the Catholic Church in all likelihood scrubbed out the special parts of the Eucharist again so they could be in control. And so given that your churches are embracing this medicine, have you run into it, or are there any challenges given that, again, someone in your congregation have some sort of breakthrough that challenges the current structure that you operate under? Does that make sense?
Spiritual power dynamics. Such a good conversation. Any thoughts?
We have a process for such things. Within our doctrine, we have written that this is meant to expand as we learn and we grow. So what we're finding is that these teachers are showing us what's already within us, what we already know, what we've hidden from ourselves, or the things that we prefer not to see. So when someone ends up having a big journey and a huge breakthrough, there's a space and an opportunity to come forward and share that, where we can meet it in discussion, and we're meeting those challenges really looking at whether or not this feels like an attack at the belief system, whether it feels like it's an attack at the egoic level, and then looking at why we have feelings about it. We believe that the presence of negative emotions is letting us know that something is out of alignment with the truest versions of ourselves. It will either enter peacefully and make sense and have this, oh wow, I met connections, got it, move forward. But if there's a negative emotion present, then there's work to do. And so we take that work and we do it together.
Cool. Is someone would you like to add anything to that?
Yeah, I would just, we really have not seen any challenges, and I believe this is due to if we can truly guide somebody through the entire process, right? And I believe this comes with education, harm reduction, preparation, and then thorough integration. Like, instead of just, this is where I was really finding a lot of my friends were having challenges, is they were leaving the country, they'd go sit with ayahuasca, and they just come back to their busy lives and not have any education as to, okay, how am I going to integrate, take two things to become whole? How am I going to reintegrate into my life with the new insights and the new lessons and the new tools that I have learned from the ceremony? So this is where I think we really need to handhold these individuals that are working and communing with sacramental medicines on, hey, it's not the medicine. It's really not the medicine, right? The true work of this is preparing for the ceremony and then integrating these lessons into your life. That is how you're going to change your life. And I found that when we do that properly, and we give people a wraparound support system in a communal setting with community and accountability, those challenges disappear.
Cool.
Integration.
Hey, thank you.
Thank you.
Sacrament.
Wait, don't tell you sometimes you have to disintegrate before you can integrate, but that's a next year conversation. Yes, please.
Hi, well, thanks so much for holding the panel on this topic. It's so important in terms of the success of the psychedelic renaissance, right? I'm Reverend Dr. Norma Burton. I live in Oregon, where we legalized the therapeutic use of psilocybin. I was on the rules committee there forming how it would roll out. But I wanted to talk about the existence of different organizations now in the United States and worldwide to support people gathering in community around religion and psychedelics. So do you know about Ligare?
Why don't you tell us for the sake of the audience?
Ligare, it's take it off on the word religion, religare, but ligare means to bind together. So it's a Christian psychedelic organization. There's another one called the Wider Table, which is out of Washington, D.C., and it's trying to join together people all over the country who want to have these wider table gatherings based on the table of Jesus, a welcoming table. And then I was at the conference, the MAPS conference in Denver, and there was a meeting like this, but it was people from all over the world who were joining together in a psychedelic church. And so that's my question. I wonder if you guys know about this international movement of legally and in other ways forming this psychedelic church that we could all, join together internationally and become a part of and really create a movement like that. And my last thing is that my daughter and I have written a book. We have an organization called Lucid Dreaming, Lucid Living, and we're just coming out with a book through Findhorn Press and Inner Traditions that's about the necessity of spiritual training, which indigenous cultures gave to young people all through the years, centuries now. So you get trained ahead of time in lucid dreaming, drumming journeys for lucidity that lead into the proper use of psychedelics. So I have flyers on that book if any of you are interested in that. But back to that question about this international psychedelic church movement and what you guys know about it.
I have a response, but any of you guys want to say anything first?
I mean, just that I would say indigenous people don't view themselves as having a religion or a church. And so this is an interesting dialogue. There's a debate among those folks about what this means. But there are great international groups. And I think what's coming up for me is maybe you're one, but we have very few elders in the United States. So we're creating a movement without eldership, and we need intergenerational eldership and initiation. And we're just learning how to do that from indigenous people and the Christian faith as well. But this is a long process.
Yeah, I am one of those unique elders who was trained in the Christian church, and I've been trained for over 40 years by indigenous elders in South America and Central America, so come talk to me.
Thank you.
Sounds like we should put you on the panel next year. Thanks so much for being here. We can take one more question, then we got to wrap up, just so you guys know. And what I'll say just in the wake of that is that, and again, this is its own rabbit hole of a conversation, but because of the way the law operates, it's very interesting. I should probably suggest this. Take a look at psychedelicsandreligion.info. I was just at Harvard University. There was an event about psychedelics and monotheistic Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. I got to make my I practice Islamawaska joke twice. As a person who's Muslim and also has been working with the sacred plant medicines for more than half my life. But I bring it up because all of the stuff was recorded, and there's a lot of really, really good deep dives on the monotheistic religions in particular and how they intersect with psychedelics, so I highly recommend it again, psychedelicsandreligion.info. I imagine that that's where you can find the information when the recordings are made. And otherwise, like, this international conversation does become more complicated in the context of like a legal environment where we're responding. U.S. churches have to respond to U.S. law and so on and so on. So, Todd, please, last question.
Okay. Hi, I'm Todd Chubich here from Los Angeles. I'm curious if you're seeing any kind of dialogue between the Indian Health Service and entheogenic churches and Native American communities around addressing mental health challenges in Native communities. And I'm curious if you're seeing much in the way of sort of interest or demand in Native American communities in Colorado for indigenous medicine traditions from elsewhere in the Americas, like ayahuasca.
I'll start by saying that I know that there has been some inquiry being done at least I don't know what's happening in the Clinton administration, but I should say that in the last couple of years there has been some efforts made. I don't know about Indian Health Services, but from SAMHSA and some of the other kind of federal agencies to do inquiries into the role or engagement or willingness to engage of registered Native American tribes in this conversation. As I'm sure you know and others can probably tell, it's very different state by state, it's different community to community. We have this very interesting particular dynamic where in the United States, the majority of registered tribes who are based here don't work with the medicines that often come from places that are not the United States, with peyote being the one exception. So it's a very interesting dynamic of seeing this kind of hybridization. I don't know if you have anything else to add about what you've seen in Colorado or anyone else, but...
It's a work in progress. There are many tables and many discussions.
This just highlights the century-long disrespect of North American Native American people, creating an insularity to them on this topic that there's a hesitancy, from my understanding, of them to get involved in debates about what should we do with ayahuasca, mushrooms. There's some of them have said to me that that's not our medicine, so we're not going to weigh in. And it's not for us to say what you should do with mushrooms. So it's a very complicated discussion, but I think there is a real interest in indigenous solidarity between the North and South, and there are some bridges being built.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge when you're talking about who's making the decision about whose authority gets to be used for a particular medicine that comes from a different place, and how those cross-national conversations happen. So it's a very, very good question. We're in the inquiry with you. And thank you all so much for being here in this conversation. We're really grateful. We scratched the surface, but what a rich surface to scratch. Thanks, y'all. Thank you one more time. One more round of applause for our panelists who are so amazing. Truly bringing it all. Really good conversation. Have a great rest of your time. Come to our conference, Psychedelic Science 2025, June, Denver, come through. I'll also be speaking about psychedelics and decriminalization with some of the people up front over here tomorrow. Take care, y'all.